Hello there, this is an online tutorial for those students on the module EDU2023. I wanted to just run through some of the issues related to your first assignment, the critical review. I know that I said we'd have a time for tutorials on Thursday, but in many regards I want you to have the answer to some of the questions that you might have before that so that you can start to be thinking about this assignment. Obviously the due date is Wednesday the 6th of November. And the session next week will be not a taught session, so you can use that time to focus on your work, to do your research and to finish writing up, if you need to, the critical review. Now, if you remember 2 weeks ago, I talked through some assignment guidance about the assignment. That PowerPoint is on Nile. In fact, all of the information you need about everything for this assignment is in the assignment tab on Nile. So that includes the reader with the articles you might want to choose from, the critical review guidance, the overview of the assignment pasted from the module handbook, and also this PowerPoint that I'm going to just run through again in this tutorial. So everything is there for you to have a look at. Basically, if we look, I'm looking at the PowerPoint. What I did was I went through each of the points on the guidance and with a set of questions to ask yourself, an audit to see how well you're doing with this process of writing your first assignment. Obviously, the most important thing is that by now you really should have chosen a research article. Now, you're free to choose any article that you want that relates to the field of special needs. However, I have put quite a lot of articles in the reader to help you. And if you choose one from that reader, that's absolutely fine. So the first questions to ask is, well, have you looked at the online reader? Have you found it? I'm hoping you have, because you had to do some work in your groups going back a few weeks now when I asked you to refer to an article in there. Have you read the article closely a few times? Have you begun to analyse it? And by that I mean, have you decided to pull out some of the themes, the issues, some of the arguments that the author is trying to talk about within that piece of work? So that's obviously the first thing. You can't really do any assignment until you've chosen the review that you're going to base it on. So choose the article first. Now the second one, the second guidance, talks about a description of the research focus should be given, written objectively. Okay, so obviously you're going to give the reader, me, and the external examiner, a description of what the article is focused upon. Is it autism? Is it behaviour? Is it special needs in general? Is it inclusion? You need to write a good paragraph that outlines what it is. And again, it's not your personal opinion. You're writing it very objectively, in a way, unemotionally actually. You're writing about it in a factual way. Equally, you should have decided which main themes or issues are in that article, and it would be a good idea perhaps to introduce to the reader where you're going to go with your discussion. What are the themes that you think the article has that are the most important? So the audit then to ask yourself is, do you understand what the focus of the article is? Do you get it? Okay. Can you write about it and think about it factually and objectively? And can you draw out themes from the article and perhaps link it to other issues related to special needs or things we might have discussed in the taught sessions? We've talked about a lot already. Okay, so it might fit into some of the things that we've talked about in class. And actually, these themes will perhaps help you to structure your assignment, because obviously you want to write your assignment in nice, structured sort of chunks that flows for the reader. So if you've said you're going to talk about these particular themes and the article illustrates these particular themes, then you're going to write about them in the main body of your work. Then the guidance 3, it says that the article should be analysed in light of legislation, relevant reading, and further research. Okay, not just your personal opinion. So this is crucial. Those themes and issues and perspectives that you pulled out of the actual article, you're going to now need to match those and link those to the wider reading. So for example, if you chose, say, an article that relates to autism, somewhere in your discussion you're going to have a discussion about what autism is, the diagnosis, etc., etc. So you need to think carefully about how you link that to the literature. Don't fall into that trap of just using one source to describe key terminology. So for example, if you chose autism, I'll use that again, I don't expect just one source that defines what autism is. You're really missing a trick. You're underplaying the potential for your research if you don't use as many sources as you can. Okay, so library research is going to be really integral to this. So you're going to link that particular article that you've chosen and the themes you've pulled out of it to the wider literature. So can you link these themes to the wider literature, including legislation if appropriate? Have you found relevant texts, articles and studies that link to this particular article? And have you sought advice from Hannah, the academic librarian, if you're finding it hard to find literature? Now, please don't go to Hannah and say, here's the title of my assignment, have you got any literature? I mean, that's unfair, really. You should go to Hannah and say, I'm writing about this article, I've pulled out these themes, these are the issues I think are important, and I'd like to try and find literature that links to these key concepts or key issues or key terminology. So you have a plan that focuses your research, okay? So that's really important. The fourth point, I just pull down my PowerPoint here. The fourth point says a summary should be included which provides a clear review of the value of this research utilised, the research process utilised, its strengths and failings. So research process, that means what has the author done to find out data? Has he done research by doing questionnaires, interviews, observations? Has he done literature research? So is it all pulled from wider sources, etc.? What do you think of the process of the research that went into this research article? So to audit that then, have you been able to summarise the research article effectively? Have you been able to give the reader an indication of how the author went about their research? Have you given a clear review of the research process that the researcher chose? Be that, like I said, observations, whatever. How have they designed their piece of research? What methods have they used? And if you want to link it to the wider research literature, then what methodology have they adopted? So you can actually refer to literature that doesn't only refer to the theme you've chosen, autism or whatever. You can actually link it to the books that relate to research methods. An example of that might be, for example, here in my office, I've got Research Methods in Education, for example. That's a book that doesn't talk about autism, but it talks about the process of research. So it might be that you want to link to some of that literature in your work as well. And also, have you discussed perhaps some of the strengths and failings of the piece? If you remember, basically, when I asked you to go in your groups and look at that research article that I gave you and feed back, that was an oral expression of almost what you're going to be writing in this assignment. So I was giving you a chance to practice that with your colleagues. And lots of you chose to discuss the strengths and failings of the piece. And that's what I would expect you to do as well in your assignment. Then you need to look at guidance 5, which says themes and issues from the article must be linked to a wide range of relevant literature and avoiding poor quality web-based sources and fact sheets. I can't tell you how many times I've read an assignment where I know that a student has put into Google some key terminology and the first thing that pops up, they've used that as a web source and put it in. Now, I've been doing this job long enough to recognise almost some of the same things that get regurgitated from websites. So avoid that like the plague. There's nothing wrong with starting your research online. In fact, when I do my research, I use Wikipedia, I Google, I use all the things I tell you not to do in order to give me a good idea of the topic and the theme. And then I go back and start to look for more academic literature that relates to the topic. So make sure you're showing me a good range of literature, and don't use one source if you can find 2 or 3 or 4. You don't need to just define things, especially keywords and key terminology and key themes. You really are missing a trick unless you don't find more than one source that relates to that. And you don't have to directly quote from them. You can just put autism as defined by brackets Jones, Howley, Mezibov, etc. The dates. You can put the authors in the citation without directly quoting from their work. So that's a good way of supplementing your reading and your reference list. So your search abilities will be most important. There's a little sort of graphic that I put into the PowerPoint that talks about, just a reminder, you find your article, okay? You pull out those relevant themes, say there's 2, 3, 4 themes that are in that particular article, and then you link those themes to the literature and texts and journals, etc. So there's a process that your literature links back to the themes of your assignment that you've pulled out from that chosen piece of research, that research article. And then finally, the guidance relates to using the University of Northampton Harvard referencing. You really need to be very, very precise now with your referencing, so that you know exactly how to do it, etc. There's guidance online, and there's a link to that I put on the PowerPoint as well. So do you have a copy of the referencing guidance that you can refer to at all times? Do you understand how to reference correctly? Have you learned from previous assignments where you might have had your referencing mentioned? And have you sought advice if you're not sure? Okay, you must do that. You don't want to start losing marks for something as silly as referencing incorrectly. That would be unfortunate. Also, you need to think about how you present this in a professional way. Every lecturer has different preferences. In terms of mine, you have to follow the guidance that I want it in Arial font size 12, so it's decent to read. And I want a 1.5 line spacing. I just find that easier to read. It looks more professional, and it allows me to annotate on Turnitin your assignments. So again, if that's the guidance, you need to make sure that you follow that. Okay. Another thing that is it would be a shame to lose marks is once you've done all this effort, done all this work, you've worked really hard. I can tell by teaching you a lot that you get engaged, you discuss things. I'm looking forward to reading how you've viewed some of these pieces of research, but don't blow it by forgetting to proofread. If I was you, I would set the deadline in your own mind a couple of days before, which gives you a day just to literally forget about the assignment and then refer back to it maybe a day later and read it with a kind of cold head and think, have I proofread? Have I made silly mistakes with grammar? Do I understand things like the apostrophe rule, full stops, etc.? Don't sort of forget to proofread for grammar and spelling, and also to make sense. Sometimes people, students especially, have such a lot to say that they write it in a way that they put lots of words in one big sentence, and it's all very sort of convoluted and confusing. Simple, easy to read, nice structure, short sentences, paragraph spaces, so that the reader doesn't get confronted with a huge wodge of words, but actually it's a pleasant experience to actually engage and read your piece of work. Okay, so is it neat, professional, and correct? Anyway, hopefully you found that useful. Again, it's all the stuff that we've talked about before. It's all the stuff that's online. Everything is in that assignment tab on Nile. So again, good luck with this. I'll see you on Thursday. And if you have any sort of individual things to talk to me about, or we can meet as a group. But if not, and this is enough, then you can go ahead and use that time to crack on with your work so that you can produce the best piece of work you can. Okay, take care anyway. Bye.